Hello again. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and today's class is CSS basic text formatting. So this is the second part in this CSS track. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets, and CSS is used for formatting when you are creating things like web pages. So when you want to format how text looks, when you want to format things like shapes and such into your web page, you would use CSS. That is what CSS is used for. So since the first thing we're talking about with CSS is text, I decided that I would show you a little bit of text formatting first. So if you are used to using HTML4, you know that there are different ways you can do things with text in HTML4. You can center text, you can make text different colors, you can use different tags so that text shows up differently. So you do have some functions in basic HTML coding for futzing with your text, but you cannot do a lot. What CSS does for you is it expands upon all the things you can do in normal HTML programming so that you can use a lot more customization for your text. So you can say things about how big you want the text to be, how many pixels you want the text to be. You can say how far you want the text to be spaced apart when you type out words. You can put borders around text. You can change colors of text. You can change the font of text. So you can do all of these things that you can't do in normal HTML. So with this class, basically, think of what we're doing today is if you opened up a Word document and then you went in to make it prettier by changing fonts and changing colors and changing all that kind of stuff. That is what we are doing with CSS today. So CSS today we are using two files. So again, as I talked about in the introduction to CSS class, we don't need any special server. We don't need any script interpreter. We don't need anything fancy or cool in order to start coding in CSS. All we need is a graphical user interface operating system, an ASCII text editor, and a web browser. So you can use Windows, you can use Mac, you can use Ubuntu, or anything. Basically, as long as you have more than a CLI, as long as you have a graphical user interface, you can use that operating system in order to start playing with CSS. So what we do is we use an ASCII text editor, so something like Notepad, or what I'm going to show you today, Notepad++, and we just type out all the code, H1 bracket, blah, 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 blah. And then once we are done, we save that as a certain file type, either .css for this cascading style sheet itself, or .html for the web page. And then from our desktop, we can double click on the HTML file and it will open up and we can see all the wonderful things our CSS code has done. So again, we do not need a GoDaddy account. We do not need a one-on-one account. We don't need a dedicated server. We don't need LAMP. We don't need WAMP. We don't need XAMPP. All we need is Notepad or Notepad++ and a web browser. That is it. So we have the two files today. We have the HTML file and then we have the CSS file that it links to. Again, in the introduction class, I showed you a number of ways you can add CSS styling to your web page. You can do it inline, you can do it for the web page itself, or you can do an external style sheet, and that is what we are going to be using today. The reason is because by and large, the external style sheets are how everybody does it. So most of the time, you very rarely do inline styling. You very rarely do an individual web page styling. Normally, you do the external style page. So that's how we are going to do it today. Now, I'm not going to explain to you a lot about how the external style page works today because I just want to start giving you the basic understanding of what cascading style sheets does, and then we will go back and get a little more technical into how you actually add this to your web pages. But you can look at my code today to start to get an idea of how all this works. So let's go over to my computer. So again, so we can start showing you how all these cascading style sheets work. So again, I have opened up the HTML page that I've created for this lab. So this page is called text_format.html, and I have shown you different ways to format text. So this is the H1 tag. So I have formatted H1 to currently look like this. This is the H2 tag. So I have formatted the H2 tag to look like this. So you can see the letters are spaced farther apart, it's red, and it has this little dash blue border. This is all done with just text coding. There's nothing too special here. Then this is the P tag. Again, one of the things that's very important to understand when you start dealing with tags, especially once you start doing CSS and HTML, is we are used to H1 tags being the biggest sized text, and then H2 is smaller, then H3 is smaller, and then like P is the smallest. But using CSS, you can actually make the P, the paragraph tag, text bigger. And then at the end, just having a little fun to show you a little bit again what you can do with CSS, is I created the Bob tag. Have you ever heard of the Bob tag before? The Bob tag is the coolest, latest, and greatest tag. It actually doesn't exist. I just made it up, and I was able to do that because CSS allows me to do that. So this is the Bob tag down here. So these are the different ways I have formatted this text just to kind of show you what's going on. So let's go over and look at the source code. So again, basically, right here we have Notepad++ open. So again, if you're going to be coding for HTML and CSS for this entire series, you can simply use Notepad or Notepad++. Notepad++ is an open source ASCII text editor that you can use on Linux, Mac, or Windows, and you can just download it for free. Just Google search Notepad++. One of the reasons I like Notepad++, one of the little things, is it has all these little numbers on the side, which is surprisingly useful once you get into the programming world. But okay, so here we are, and we are looking at test_format.html. So this is the HTML page. So if we go over and we look at my folder structure, we can see test underscore format, and this is the HTML page, and we can see that it has that little Chrome browser thing. So this is the page that we just opened and that we coded. So we open this up just like a normal web page. So it's HTML, then we go to head. We create the head, we close the head. Now the important thing for CSS is this link. And again, in one of the next classes, we will talk about this more. For right now, just accept this as it is and don't worry about it too much. Basically what this does is this links to this external cascading style sheet. So basically this link right here is what pulls in this information. So if you don't have this, nothing else will work. The main important thing, most of this you're going to keep identical no matter what you're doing. But the big thing is this ref equals double quotation marks and then test css.css. So this is the CSS file itself. If you look up here, that's the name of the CSS file. So that is what you're linking to. Then you say type text CSS relation style sheet media all. Again, we'll talk about all of that later, and then we close the head. So basically the big thing is that you copy this essentially verbatim, except for where this is the file name of the cascading style sheet that you have created. So if you made yours a different name, that's cool, that's fine. Just make sure you put that different name in here, and make sure you put the cascading style sheet in the same folder as your HTML document. Then as we go down, we're going to notice there's not any really cool, fancy, extra stuff within this HTML page. So we've got this link here. That's new. That's different from a normal HTML. But the rest of this looks pretty bland and normal. So we've got the H1 here. This is H1. We got the H2 here. This is H2. We got P here. This is P. Well, we do have this little weird Bob down here. So there's this weird Bob tag. And just so you guys understand, because I know you're new, I completely made up the Bob tag. I created the Bob tag. So don't think there's actually, in fact, a Bob tag out there. I created this. I just want to show you that this is something that you can do. And then, of course, we close the body, and then we close the HTML. So this is what this looks like. So really the only new thing here is this link and the bob. So what happens is this links to our cascading style sheet. So the test css.css. Now this is where it all gets interesting and you have to understand what's going on. So this is where we formatted the text. So we have the h1 tag here, we have the h2 tag here, we have the p tag here, and then I created the bob tag. So this is how it works. So the first thing that you say is you type what tag you want to be dealing with. So you say h1 or h2 or p or bob. Whatever tag you're dealing with, you put here. And then you put a space. So never forget the spaces. You always put a space. Then you put an open squiggly bracket. So this kind of looks like a function in normal programming, and it's kind of a way to think about it. Basically, think of it like we're kind of like opening up a function and we're defining variables, if you know anything about programming. And if you don't know anything about programming, just forget what I just said. But basically what we are going to do here is we are going to be defining the variables for our text. This is essentially an easy way of thinking about this. So here I have a lot of different variables, and then I have defined them, or I have set them to what they should be. So with cascading style sheets, there are default formatting that the web browsers will use. So when a web browser opens up a web page and there's no cascading style sheet available to it, it will simply use whatever is built into the web browser. So all we are going to do here is we are going to give it a couple of special variables so it tweaks those little things and changes them. If we do not change the variable here in the CSS, it will not be changed in the web browser. So if we don't set a size here in the CSS, the web browser will just show whatever default size is set within the web browser. If we do not set a color here in CSS, the web browser will simply use whatever the default is that's set within the web browser, so on and so forth. So basically, we only set the variables here that we want to change. Otherwise, we leave it however it is. So what I've done here is let's look at the H1. So when we're looking at H1, this is the text that I created. And you can notice this text looks really kind of odd for web page text. It's big and bulky, and it looks different, especially from the other text. And so it has a color, and then it has this overline and this underline. And so all of that is done in CSS. So if we look here, we can look and we can see that I've set the font family. So within CSS, you can change the font. We will have another class on fonts and CSS because they can get a little complicated, and it's a little outside of this particular class, but you can change the font. So just like when you're in a Word document and you change the font from Times Roman to Arial or something, you can do that within CSS. So what I did is I set this to something called Fantasy. So the big thing here is what we do is we find what we want to change, and then we put a colon, and then we set this variable to whatever it is. So font hyphen family colon and then fantasy. So we want the font colon to be fantasy. And then the big thing, whenever we're doing programming, we have to make sure we use the right syntax. And with CSS, what is very, 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 very important is semicolons. So CSS is, again, like a lot of the other programming languages, like PHP or whatever else, they use semicolons to delineate when something is finished, when you're done with something. So you say the font family colon fantasy. Then we go to color. So we say, what is the color? We want the color colon to be brown, and then semicolon to end. And then we want the text decoration. So the text decoration is those lines. So text hyphen decoration colon. And then you can define two pieces of information for any of these variables, just with a space if it's allowed. So this text hyphen decoration colon, we did overline space underline. And so with that is with the H1, that's what gives us this overline and that underline. And then what we do is we do semicolon, because anytime we set one of these, we're going to finish with a semicolon. And then we close all of this with the close squiggly bracket. So that's very important. Again, just like with other programming languages, you open, close, you open, close, you open, close. You open a tag, you close a tag. You open the head, you close the head. You open the body, you close the body. You have to remember to close. I'm telling you guys, because I know a lot of you guys are going to forget this, and they're going to be like, Eli, why doesn't my CSS work? Why? Because you forgot the closing squiggly bracket. And I'm sure there's a technical term for the squiggly bracket, but even my programming instructors always called it a squiggly bracket, so I don't know. I call it a squiggly bracket. So that's what we're doing. So we say what tag that we want to define, then we open with a squiggly bracket, then we do the variable, colon, what we want to set it to, close with a semicolon. Again, you're going to forget that semicolon and it's going to make a mess out of everything. So that's what we do with H1. Then we go down to H2, and to show you some of the other things you can do. So we set the color to red. We set the border style to dashed. We set the border width, so the width of this border that we're looking at. So if we look at this border here, right, you can see how it's wide, I guess you would say. So that's 5 pixels wide. We set the color to blue. We set the text align to center. So if we want to center this text, it's now centered in the middle of this page, obviously. And then what we did is we did letter hyphen spacing for 20. And so letter spacing is, see how these are spaced apart? So again, this is something that you can do in CSS. So if we go down, we look at P, so this is the normal paragraph tag we're used to dealing with. So color, we set to purple. Font hyphen size, so the actual size of the font itself, we set to 100 pixels. And so as we can see here, this is really, 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 really big, right? And then if we go over, we can see that I simply created the Bob tag. For the hell of it. This is not best programming practices by any means, but you guys know me. I just kind of do things because they're fun sometimes. So I just created the Bob tag for the hell of it. And so in order to create a tag, all I had to do was literally type out whatever I wanted the tag to be called, space, and then just open the squiggly bracket. And then I said for the Bob tag, I wanted that to be the color green and the font size 25 pixels. So that is where we have the Bob tag here. So this really is all there is to formatting your text in CSS. What you do is you say what tag you want to deal with, H1, H2, P, H3, whatever. You open the squiggly bracket, then you say what you want to modify, the font family, the color, the text decoration, the border, the style, width, color, alignment, line spacing, so on and so forth. You do colon, you got to remember that, colon, and then you say what you want to set that to. Brown, red, blue, dashed, 5 pixels, 25 pixels, whatever. And then you close with that darn semicolon. Remember the semicolon. Then once you're done setting all of those things, remember you close with a squiggly bracket, and there you are. So remember, anything that you do not define in CSS, the web browser will use the default that's built into the web browser. And they're all slightly different. The default built into Internet Explorer is a little different than the default built into Firefox, which is a little different than the default built into Chrome. So if there's some kind of formatting that you really, really, really care about on your web page, the best thing to do is go into the CSS and modify it there. Now again, and we're going to talk about this more in one of the following classes, all we had to do to add this CSS file to our HTML web page is add this line of code in the head of the HTML page. So link ref equals, and the big thing here is whatever you call that CSS file. bob.css, test.css, css.css, I don't care, but this has to be the same name as this or it won't work. And then for right now, just keep all this identical. Type equals double quotation mark text CSS, relation equals style sheet, media equals all. Make sure all of that stays the same. And then past here, right, all of this looks like a normal HTML web page other than this Bob tag I created at the bottom just for kind of the hell of it. So that is really all there is to formatting text in CSS. At least basically. We can do a lot more things. Again, we're going to get into fonts in another class because fonts can be, Here's the thing, CSS by no stretch of the imagination is complicated. I just, with all of these classes, I want to give you out little drips and drabs so you don't get lost. Because remember, the biggest problem that I find in programming languages is that you get so much information dumped on you that you lose track of what's going on, and then they pile more information on you, and so basically you get frustrated. It's not that you can't learn it. It's not that it's too hard. It's not that you're not smart enough. It's just they dump information on you so quickly that you're quickly drowning in information, and then you give up because it's too hard. When no, it's not. They just dumped way too much information on you too quickly. Now, with this basic text formatting, again, as I've said, with all of these programming classes, any programming class I give you, I am going to tell you you should go out and buy a book so that you can actually look at the material and read the material and have the book open and be able to see what's going on. The biggest problem with programming is, again, you have to be very, very, very specific. The space has to be at the right place. The semicolon has to be at the right place. The closing bracket has to be at the right place. And you have to use the right closing bracket. Like, a lot of brackets kind of look the same, but especially to a new person, but you got to use the right one. And if you use the wrong one, well, that's wrong. It's not going to work. So, so if you want to learn more about this basic text formatting, again, I say the Visual Quick Start guides are very good books. But whatever you do, go out and get a book on CSS3 to make sure you can actually look at it. And with all this formatting, there's a lot of different things that you can define, and more than I showed here. If you go and you grab a book, you will be able to see all the different things you can define for text. If you don't want to spend the $30 on a book, you can go on to Google and then just do a search for text formatting in CSS, and a lot of different things will pop up. I didn't find any one good sheet that shows absolutely everything, but if you are playing with this, just like I say, and you want to learn, you want to figure out something else with text, just do a Google search for CSS text formatting, and a lot of different options should pop up. So if you're thinking, how do I align something left? How do I align something right? How do I align something in the center? How do I do this, that, or the other thing? It's all there. Just do a Google search for it. But that's really all there is. Again, pretty simple, pretty easy. So as you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy. Today's class was CSS Basic Text Formatting. As always, I enjoy teaching this class, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.